Hi guys, welcome back to the Wargamer and another straightforward tanks painting tutorial. This time I'll be tackling the Russian tanks, and as always I'll be showing you how you can quickly and easily paint your vehicle using nothing but regular brush techniques and acrylic paints. After you've assembled your miniatures, the first task is to prime it, and for this I've used the Army Painter's Army Green Primer. And this is because it gives us a really nice green base colour that we can build up from in later steps and really saves a lot of time. If you don't have access to the spray, then you could use a regular black or white primer and then just apply the Army Green over the top with a regular brush. After priming, the first task is to apply a wash of military shader across the entirety of the tank. This will help to alleviate the blandness in the green that we've currently got and add some variance in the shading. Now, I would highly recommend mixing in some water with your wash, as applying it straight out of the bottle can be a little bit too strong, and preferably use distilled water for this. Now, you want to create a mixture of roughly 1 part ink to 1 part water and apply this across the entirety of the tank. Continuing with the military shader, we can apply some streaking effects to the surface of the vehicle. So first of all, take an old brush which has lots of bristles which are very coarse and dip that into the military shader and remove most of the excess onto a tissue. Then drag it vertically across some of the flat panels to create the effect that rain has washed down the surface of the tank and has created some light rain marks. Following on from the washes, we now want to apply some edge highlights, but this time instead of using a regular brush, I'll instead be using a small piece of packing foam dipped into some Scaly Hide. Now before you apply it to the miniature, remove most of the excess paint onto a tissue. Once you've done that, you can then lightly dab the sponge across the edges of the tank. Now this will create an irregular edge. It'll give it a much more realistic looking highlight than if we just done it with a regular brush or dry brushed it onto the miniature. You can also use it to create some chipping effects if you apply it to the center panels of the tank. The next area of our tank that we will be painting will be some of the metal areas, but instead of using a metallic paint, I want to create the effect that these areas have rusted after exposure to the air, water and also mud and grime. So I'm going to be using oak brown instead. We want to paint both the tracks but also the vents and exhausts with this paint as well. With the tracks themselves completed, the next task is to paint the rubber coating of the road wheels using matte black. Now I wouldn't worry too much if you do overspill, as we'll be covering these areas later on with some mud and dirt effects. So now that all of the base coats have been achieved, we can now move on to applying some weathering to the tank. But before we do, I would highly recommend applying any decals at this stage. Now once that has been done, we are going to be starting off by applying some rust to the tracks, the vents and also the exhaust that we painted in the previous step. Now for this, I'm going to be using a mixture of fur brown and water and applying this as a wash over these areas. Now you roughly want to create a mixture of 1 part fur brown to 2 parts water and apply this over all of the oak brown areas we painted in the previous step. Continuing with the weathering, I'll now be applying a highly diluted mixture of mid-brown wash over the entirety of the green armour on the tank. Now the mixture should be roughly 1 part mid-brown to 2 parts water. We're going to be applying this over the entirety of the green armour, and this will give it a subtly brown colouring. It gives the effect that dirt and grime has built up over the surface of the tank itself and become ingrained in the paintwork itself. And don't worry about unevenly applying this wash across the surface of the tank, as this will just enhance the weathering effect that we're trying to achieve. In this next step, we'll now be dry brushing the tank's tracks using gunmetal. Now to dry brush, it's very simple. Simply take a dry brush, dip it in your gunmetal, remove most of the excess onto a piece of paper or a tissue, and then lightly drag it across the surface of the tracks. This will then pick out on the raised details and give the effect that rust and grime has ingrained themselves into the recesses of the tracks themselves. Continuing with the weathering, I'll now be applying some chipping effects to the armour, and for this I'll be using a sponge again as well as matte black. Now simply take your sponge, dip it into the matte black, remove most of the excess onto a piece of paper or a tissue, and then lightly dab it along the edges of the tank. You will want to focus this on areas where you'd imagine damage would accumulate. This includes areas where the crew walk and also where the tank will be driving through obstacles, so focus it around the bottom and front of the tank as well as around the tracks themselves as well. Once again, using the sponge, I'll now be applying some Werewolf Fur over the tracks and road wheels on the tank. This will give the effect of mud and dirt which is built up. Now you want to build this up over several layers, and you can pretty much apply as much of the Werewolf Fur as you like. The final step in painting our tank is to apply some targeted washes of strong tone ink across the miniature. Now this wash can be used in a number of different ways. You could use it to create some streaking grime, or you could use it to enhance some of the details around areas such as the exhaust, the vents and also the tracks. And finally, with some targeted washes into some of the deeper recesses, you can create the effect that mud has started to build up and accumulate in these hard to reach areas. And here we have the completed tank. Now whilst I focused on an SU-85 in this tutorial, you could apply the exact same colours and techniques to any of the other Russian tanks. Now in the description below you can find a full list of the paints used in this video, along with some links to both my Facebook and my Instagram pages, which you should definitely check out if you want to keep up to date with the projects that I'm currently working on. If you enjoyed this video, please do let me know in the comments below, along with your suggestions for future straightforward tanks painting tutorials. And also don't forget to subscribe to be kept up to date with any of my future videos. And last but not least, I just want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, because it's you guys who make these videos possible. Now if you're interested in supporting me as well, you should definitely check out the link in the description below, which will take you directly to my Patreon page, and from there you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month, and that'll just really help me in producing future content. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching and goodbye.